great day for work here at the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. I'm Kimberly Ficklin, your host. And every week we talk to professionals just like you all around the world because we want to find out what they do to create a profitable business, the kind of business where people really want to work. Hello and happy healthy day, everyone. Today we are talking about breaking the gender code with Danielle Dobson. And Danielle is a speaker, author, facilitator, and mother. As a CPA with extensive corporate experience, Danielle covered everything from private practice to multinationals. Identifying the high levels of stress and overwhelm experienced personally and by others, Danielle wanted to make a difference. She pivoted from a corporate career and has been serving clients in the well-being space for the past 7 years. This mission drove Danielle to conduct a 2-year research project, interviewing over 50 women and a few men in leadership roles across a diverse range of industries, which became the basis for her book, Breaking the Gender Code: How Women Can Use What They Already Have to Get What They Actually Want. Now, Danielle is donating 10% of all book sales to an Australian-first mother and sons program, which supports mothers to raise their sons to become respectful men. Well, welcome, Danielle.
Oh, thanks, Kimberly. It's great to be here. I'm so excited to be here and speak with you.
Thanks so much, Danielle. I'm really excited about our chat today because, well, we're giggling because we talked a long time before this and are already getting along very well. But this is a topic that I do think is very important right now to have these types of discussions. They're a little bit difficult sometimes, but in the environment that we're in right now, which we've discussed previously on this podcast in the last couple of episodes, where we're just like cracking the workplace open, it's the most opportune time for us to have these types of really hard discussions about things in the workplace that can be changed and how to change them. So today, Danielle is going to share with us how to break the gender code. So let's dive right in. Danielle, first, please tell us how you became passionate about what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kimberly. Well, it's interesting. I actually did not set out to start on this mission. I had no idea I would be here right now. And it all started when I was sitting in a cozy cabin on Lake Washington, and I'm 2 days into a 3-day intensive with my coach, Pam. And I felt like I'd hit a brick wall and I felt like I was stuck. Because the whole point of me being there was to ramp up my business, my coaching business, as I knew I needed some help and some guidance. And Pam can see I'm struggling and she reminds me about what's important. And she said, you've got to get to know the people you want to coach and support and work with better. So what's going on for them? What are their biggest challenges? How can you help them? And so those 3 questions just changed everything for me because I decided I wanted to help people and support women who lead at work and then also lead at home as lead parents. And so from that point there, that was the start of the Wonders of Women Leaders research project. And so from there, I came back to Australia and I started reconnecting with friends and colleagues in the corporate and business world because that had been my home base for 13 years where I worked as a CPA with multinationals in locations all across the world. So based on referrals from others and a little bit of stalking by me, I started interviewing all these people who were leaders and lead parents because I wanted to understand how being a parent influenced their leadership style and how being a leader influenced how they parented. So rather than focusing on 2 worlds, I wanted to see what was working well in everything that they do and what strengths they bring and build in both. So there were well over 100 conversations, including some with a few good men. And I interviewed people at all levels of leadership across a range of industries. So CEOs, CFOs, CMOs, so not-for-profits, government, banking, finance, engineering, petrochemicals, you name it. And they all had demanding roles with back-to-back meetings for weeks at a time, but the appetite to share was huge and their contribution was highly valued. But what happened was life-changing, because I was interviewing all these amazing people and they looked like Wonder Women from the outside, but not one thought they were worthy of that superhero title. They just thought that the way they lived and operated was how they and society expect. And they found it easier to see brilliance in others. And I also learned a few things about parenting. People kept saying, oh, parenting, fundamentally changed them. And that wasn't a surprise because I experienced that too when I became a parent. So I have 3 children. But what was surprising was how all but one said that they became a better leader and it positively impacted the people around them when they became a parent. And they all agreed and shared that they built strengths from being a parent of empathy, perspective, adaptability, flexibility, critical thinking, creativity, efficiency. And these are all critical skills that are needed in leadership and life today. So when I made that connection, I thought, actually, there's something here that I need to investigate further. But also what kept coming up were gender disparities, so stories of inequality, discrimination, inappropriate treatment of women in the workforce, and that extended, not necessarily that, but extended out to home life and the unequal distribution of unpaid work. And it all just seemed so unfair, and I wanted to know where it all came from, understand it, and fix it yesterday. So what actually started as a research project morphed into a mission, because what I was learning from speaking to all these people and then deeper research, I felt it was just too good to keep to myself as a research project. So I was compelled to share it more broadly because I knew it could change lives. But it did come at a cost, because to do all this work justice, I had to face my own judgmental beliefs and I had to break my own code that I'd created around productivity and motherhood. And it was painful. And so, essentially I found that we're operating under a code, like the gender code, all these cultural beliefs that are established throughout history, and then they reinforce all these stereotypes, which then go and fuel a system that keeps women in a support role. And that's not helpful or relevant in today's world. And part of the reason that I know this is if we look at our evolutionary past, the division of roles along gender lines is not necessarily part of our DNA because we were an egalitarian people. And if you think about that, to survive in a harsh environment, we needed to adapt and be flexible and play to our strengths. And there's also good evidence to suggest that men were more involved in child rearing than we originally thought, and gathering, and women were also hunters. So I found that mind-blowing when I learned that. And then when we look at brain research and studies of emotions and analysis of girls and boys, it actually shows us that we're more similar than different. So then that made me realise that women as a gender are not naturally suited to carers, like as a gender, and men as a gender are not naturally suited to breadwinners. Individuals might be suited, but as a gender, rather than being innate, it's actually part of our culture and something we learn to do. So when I learnt that, I thought that was incredibly exciting because it's open, hunting, gathering, if you want to talk like that, to men and women. And when we play to our strengths and work together and collaborate, we can create incredible things that are beyond the gender code, beyond, that coding. What I found, though, as well, is that the gender code is so strong, and so we buy into it, like each of us buy into it and then drive it personally. And we don't actually realise that it's increasing our personal expectations, that all these pressures to perform. And some of the pressures that a lot of women face are perfectionism, working harder, mental load. But one that I found has the greatest impact is that pressure to have it all. Because for decades, many women have aspired to have it all, a fulfilling work, happy family, good relationships. But actually the reality is either or, and deep divisions with, work and life, career, health, career, family. And so it's left many of us thinking that we need to juggle and straddle like two worlds and work on some sort of elusive balance equation or integrate two worlds. But it actually leads to massive expectation gaps, frustration, and also that huge one that a lot of us carry around is that guilt, that parent guilt. So, yeah, and I guess I brought all this together, and I was thinking about this is over a kind of, a couple of year process, and bringing all kinds of different connections together and working in leadership, coaching people in leadership positions and people in small businesses, build their businesses. And then also parenting my own children, looking at their education and where they're going and who they are. And I just came to the conclusion throughout that rather than basing our lives on outdated gender codes and unrealistic expectations, we can actually define what we want and let go of the rest. So we can actually go from struggling and juggling to writing and executing our own code and create a life that works for us rather than against it. And so I found there's a few keys to this, and I came up with a methodology and a framework which I've included in the book, because I thought there's no point just saying that there's a gender code and that it's, here it is and what it is and this is what it results in, but we needed to have a way forward. So that's where I created a bit of a methodology around that. So
awesome, because otherwise we can talk about it all day long, but if we don't know how to move forward or work through it, right? Or even really what that means. I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking about all my work years, and I worked from the time my youngest child was in kindergarten full-time all the way until I got sick in the workplace, which is why I do what I do now. But and it was because of so much stress and pressure. And it's true. Like I think about these types of things. So if one of my children were sick, it was an automatic that I took the time off of work, because my husband almost always got paid more than me. And often people will say, well, maybe your husband is more skilled or whatever. He did have a skill my ex-husband did have a skill at the time. He made cabinets. His father had done it all of his life, so he could make cabinets, right? I mean, but he didn't go to school. He didn't have paper. He didn't, he didn't go to college or any of that. And I also worked somewhere where I used my skill set, right?
Yeah.
And yet he was the one that made the most money. So if the kids got sick, then I took the day. It was just a given. It was never, which one of us is going to take the day off? Here's the real truth. There was never even conversation about it.
And that's the interesting thing. That's kind of the missing piece. There's just so much assumed knowledge. And this is what I talk about in the book too. Like, we assume rather than ask a lot. And, it's across all organizations, all kinds of conversations, but in particular, those really important conversations around sharing the caring. And it's language too, though, isn't it? It's like, I'm helping mum, or I'll help you, or I'll mind the kid. Whereas if it was mum,
right.
it's like, it's just what you do. Like, and why is it helping mum? Or why is it not contributing to the family, operations, the engineering, It's so funny because I think of it as like you're a CEO of the family because you have all the, responsibilities and everything like that. But you also clean the toilets.
Right.
So,
it truly is your business.
So how many CEOs do you know that clean the toilets? That's where the real disconnect is. Like, you have all this operational responsibility, or a CIO, but then you've also got to do, well, you don't have to, but typically we do those kind of jobs, and also the mental load. And I don't know if you've got studies over there in the US, but we've had one recently of times of restrictions with COVID, and based on it wasn't a huge sample size, but they found that for every hour that a male does in the house of unpaid labour, domestic labour, a woman does 1 hour 46 And 46 minutes, I actually think that's understated.
Right.
But if you extrapolate...
Men did that study. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly.
Jokes.
But even if it was that, so that's 45 minutes more, if you extrapolate, that's just unpaid labour. We're not here talking about the emotional labour, like the thinking and all the rest of it that is done, and the planning and everything. But if you take that out over a week, a month, a year, that's less time that is available for work, or for sleep, or for exercise, or I think we've got to get better at quantifying that unpaid work, because it's not included in GDP. It's not considered, kind of worthy, I guess. But what I'm saying though is that in order for to share the caring, point out all the great skills and strengths that people build from caring for others. So it's not necessarily parents, but it's people who care for others, who take time out to care, building emotional intelligence, empathy, perspective, adaptability, flexibility. They're all those really critical skills that leadership experts talk about right now that are needed for the workplace for a different style of leadership, moving away from authoritarian, like command and control, more of, compassionate leaders, empathetic leaders. Well, instead of having all that training at work, you can actually do empathy 101 by caring for others in your relationships. So it actually becomes, I feel to share the load, we've got to make it more attractive for everybody, for them to see how it actually benefits them professionally. So I actually see it as a career and leadership asset rather than a detriment. But we need to have more people doing it. That's the thing. Not only from a career perspective, but from a family and relationship perspective, so that the caring can be shared, and there are more hours for women to be productive and contribute to the workforce.
So going back into the workplace, how can, let's just talk to the males that are listening right now. How can a male leader, CEO, executive, director, whatever you are, how can a male support a female in the workplace in an appropriate and empathetic way? What is one way that you could get started? Because I know I'm going to go back. I'm going to ask you the question, but I'm going to just preface a little bit here. I know that sometimes, especially in our workplace, in the environment that has been in the last decade or so, men are afraid more so to talk to women in a way that is emotion-based, or get maybe too involved in their personal situations. You get what I'm saying? And I think men are really kind of putting women at arm's length for safety reasons, which I understand, which is good for all of us. That's fine. But how can that same male be empathetic to that woman, support that woman in the appropriate way?
Great question. First of all, like my initial, first step I would say is having conversations where you're asking rather than assuming. So asking her. What I found in the research talking to senior leaders is that when you listen to somebody, listen to understand and listen to connect rather than listening to respond or react, then you're building solid relationship foundations. So listening to somebody and really listening to their story, listening to more than what they're actually saying. Some people call it deep listening, but really listening to what they're saying, trying to park the biases that you're aware of. There's a lot of unconscious bias, and we've all got to live and accept those. But parking those and just listening to her, to what she's saying, and listening to connect and understand, and asking questions rather than making assumptions and thinking that you know the answers. And one of the biggest things I find with senior male leaders who are struggling with this and struggling with increased diversity and inclusion in their workplaces is they don't get it, but they feel like they need to have the answers, and that's fine, because that is their training. That's the way that they've been trained their whole life, to have all of the answers, to know what to do, to be that person. You know, that one person has all the responsibility. But what I've found through this research is the leaders who do have that deeper level of empathy, who are effective, who have the women and the men who are queuing up to be in their teams, who want to be mentored, they get this, that they don't need to have all the answers. They need to have the great questions to ask their people, because their people have the answers. So I would extend that beyond, not just female leaders and potential women having these conversations, but everyone that they lead, that they don't need to have the answers. And this is part of the code that we build throughout our whole life, based on all of this training that we have. And what I say is that it's okay, like where you are right now, men, women, is okay, because it's based on all the training throughout your life, all the messages that you've had, and this code that you've been building your whole life. But you can question it and understand it and interpret it. And then you can ask, does it make sense anymore? Like, is this the way I want to keep operating? And if it does, that's okay. That's okay. If it's not costing you, if you're feeling that that's the way for you to go, then that's okay. But if you do want something different, then you can decide if there's parts of the code that you really value and that you want to keep, and that's okay. Parts of the code that you want to delete, completely get rid of, and then new parts of the code that you want to create. And you can write and create your own unique code. And that's, I guess, the main message that I want to get across to, is where you're at right now is totally okay, but you don't have to stay there. So there are things that you can do to write and create your own code. And that's where I came up with this methodology called Circle, to write and create your own code. And one of the C's in the circle is conversation. So coming back to that, that interaction. So having those conversations where you're really listening and connecting and understanding, and knowing that you don't have to have the answers. I think that was one of the biggest insights I came across.
Right? Because even think about what kind of guilt men feel when they can't fix things. So you're saying that because that's how they're built. Like you said so many things that brought up stuff for me. So men are fixers. This is a conversation I have in my house daily. I need more girlfriends. I tell my husband, don't treat me like I'm your guy friend, and I won't treat you like you're my girlfriend, because we can't give each other that. Listen to understand is so important, because I'll beat on my husband here. I can see him like just wanting me to get to the point, right? Just tell me what you need. Just tell me what you need. Just tell me what you need so I can fix it. Almost like he's fiending. Just tell me. I don't need all the details. And I'm like, but I need to tell you the details, because that's how I get through my process, right? So you may not want to hear it all, but here's the thing. Listen to understand. Here in the States, there is a movie back in the 80s called, it reminds me of this because I tell my husband this often, White Men Can't Jump. I don't know if you've heard of it there. Yeah, okay. So Rosie Perez, right? She says, I'm thirsty. And Woody Harrelson jumps up and he gets her a glass of water, right? And he brings it back down. And she says, here's what I'm talking about. When I say I'm thirsty, I don't want you to bring me a glass of water. I want you to feel my thirst. And I always say that that's the way that we can be good listeners, because we're listening to understand, why do you feel thirsty, or empathize with someone. I know how it feels to be thirsty. I'm often thirsty, right?
Yes.
Right. Instead of like, here's some water. And right. Which seems, I guess, really probably my husband would be like, well, duh, that seems like the thing to do. Like, if you're thirsty, I'm going to give you some water and that's it. But more often, the point is that women like to be heard, and often we're not. I'll just say that happens right in my own home in that way. And I don't blame my husband. I'm not mad at him for it. It's just because, like you said, that's how he's built. Right.
Yes.
The other thing you said that I think was really important to us, that you don't have to hold on to it. You can stop right now and write your own code. A lot of times people, I think, are maybe even embarrassed to go back on some type of code they lived by for a long time.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like they're like, well, but I've been telling everybody all my life it's like this. And so if I actually break my own code and I start telling people that I don't believe that anymore, then what will people think about me? So just holding on to something. I mean, we say it all the time in business. Just because something's always worked doesn't mean it works today. Doesn't mean it'll work tomorrow. It doesn't, like,
Exactly.
I'm all about agile workplace. That's how I work, is agile. This is truly agile. Again, breaking the gender code is just identifying what your business needs are for that day around the area of gender, empathy, and listening to understand.
Yeah, perfect. Love that analogy, drawing the two together. Exactly. And isn't that a great way to look at it, though? Because what's the motivation for why we're agile in our business? It's because we can see a productive outcome. So we're agile, we pivot, we shift, we, cut costs or make more revenue. There is a measurable outcome. But with the code breaking stuff and writing your own code, it's something we don't necessarily attach a KPI to, or so why we do it has to be something probably like deeper. We have to tap into something deeper in ourselves. It's not tangible and not measurable, not in a nice neat box for us. But we know that it's going to benefit us and everyone around us, because when we break our own code, we create the conditions and the environments for our future code breakers, which is, incredible. Like it just, we're setting them up to be able to break their codes, and especially around the gender code. So we need to tap into that, that further motivation. And that's something I've looked at for a long time, because I was a CPA, and then I was actually a personal trainer for a little bit, and a wellness coach and an executive coach. So looking at what motivates people, all the way along. And the one that was sustainable the most was executive coaching, because there's a business outcome. The other ones where your health and well-being is, the main motivator for change, not as sustainable as executive coaching, because there's not that productive measurable outcome. So to change the code, it takes effort and commitment to really wanting to do it. So recently, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, there was some groundbreaking Australian research that was released by an organisation called the Bank West Curtin Economics Organisation, and they've been using data that Australian organisations have to submit on workplace gender equality, so all these different measures and markers. And the research found that there's a causal link between having more women in senior leadership roles, so having more gender balance, and the company's market value, the company's productivity, profitability, and business performance. We have like a 6.6% increase in market value. And then there's some other stats too, but there is a causal link. They were able to show that having more women in leadership roles and gender balance and diversity in higher tier leaderships, executive leadership and board level improves the business. It was just incredible. I did a post on LinkedIn about it, and I got, thousands and thousands of views of it, because it's not only now the right thing to do, it's the smart business thing to do, to have more women in leadership roles. So there's a really good imperative to do this and continue with this in your organisation. And when I looked into this and I did a lot more research, I already knew why it had a positive impact, based on a lot of all this research that I've been doing around, the leadership skills and qualities, and that women, what I found in the research was, tend to set everyone else around them for success, for others to succeed. They look for connections, they look for opportunities, that empathy, that understanding the other person, connecting like humans. And they're building this psychological safety in the workplace. So the trust, which then allows people to be creative and innovative and bring the best of who they are to everything that they do in a safe space. And that's what we need more of in organisations and businesses, because artificial intelligence and robots are going to be able to do all of the basic work. We need humans to go to this other level, this higher level of creativity and innovation, and think way beyond what we do now.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only do that in an environment that is psychologically safe and where people can bring the best of who they are to everything that they do. So that's why it's important to have not only more gender balance in leadership roles, but also more leaders who are empathetic and set others up for success.
That is very interesting that you brought that up and said that's psychologically safe, because I just did a post on LinkedIn recently where there was 4 attributes to like the best, healthiest workplace. And by and large, out of the 4, psychological safety won over. It won over like huge. And so how do we create that? I know that a lot of males have problems creating that psychological safety. And I know that only because based off of going in and doing talks and speaking with, my own clients and males who say, oh, well, I'm not sure how to create this. I'm not sure how I create that space. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to have that conversation. So I think that's really interesting that you're saying psychological safety. So if you are listening and you are wanting to make these types of changes, that, again, like Danielle mentioned, you have to make them it really has to be at your core. It's something you want to do, not just something that because Danielle and I are talking about it today and you heard it on a podcast, you're like, oh, I probably should do that in my work. But really because you can recognize that doing it the same way all the time hasn't always worked in the past, and being agile means changing. How can you create psychological safety in your workplace if you don't know how to do it? You connect with someone like Danielle, and you find that out, because that's obviously what she does. You buy her book, Breaking the Gender Code, and work through that. I'm sure there's you reach out to her in any way that you can. But if it's something that you're interested in doing, again, this is the best time to make changes to your workplace than there's ever been before. A lot of us are at home. Hopefully there will be a time when we all return to the workplace. And when we do, we can have already set the groundwork for the changes to come when employees walk back into the workplace. And we can make it more healthy and more happy than it's ever been before by just making the changes really to your own personal ideals. If that's what you want to do. If not, you may say, I don't care. That's how I want to run my business. And that's fine too. But if not, I think this is the perfect time to be thinking about these types of things. So with that said, Danielle, this was a great conversation to have. I'm sure we could talk forever and ever about it. But in closing, is there anything that needed to be said that we did not say?
I think we covered a lot. I think that I would like to leave people with, just a first step of what they could do, whether you want to stay or not, or build your own code or stay where you are, is to get curious. So ask yourself the question, is this way of working for me anymore? And get curious about it, and why. If it is, then why? If it isn't, why not? Really asking those questions, asking yourself to understand. So asking yourself those questions. So that's what I'd love to leave you all with.
That's a great close. It actually swings right back to the beginning when I asked you, tell us how you became passionate, and you talk about how you had to break your own code and it was really hard. So now you're saying the most important thing is break your own code and it's really hard. It may be hard, but there's no better time than today. And again, like she said, you may not want to, but you'll never know unless you pick up the book and read it and learn and start asking those questions of yourself. The other thing I think I would kind of like to just tag along to that is that you can also ask other males in your workplace. curious questions and ask them what they think and if they struggle with it, and if they would like you to create a space in your business where everybody can learn how to have very deep conversations and still have it be appropriate in the workplace.
Yes, fantastic. Yes, that support and that community at work, building that is so crucial for, to sustain any kind of change. Yes, brilliant.
Absolutely. Point. Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Danielle. It was wonderful to have you. I do have recurring guests, so maybe someday you'll be on the podcast and share your wisdom and value with us again. But at this point, thank you so much.
Thank you. No worries, Kimberly. It's been really fun. Thanks so much.
You are so welcome. This is the close of the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. Please check the show notes for links to Danielle and all of the resources that we shared in this show. And please share this episode with someone that you know would really benefit from it. Have a happy, healthy day. This is Kimberly Ficklin signing off. That's a wrap for today. The Happy Healthy Workplace podcast is now complete. Be sure to subscribe and join us weekly for secrets, solutions, or strategies that help you create a profitable business where people really want to work. This is Kimberly Ficklin, wishing you a happy, healthy day.